Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Alms. I'm a reporter at NextGov FCW, and I'm really excited to welcome you to today's session. As you just heard, we're going to dive into the IRS's direct file. If you haven't heard of it yet, I don't know where you've been, first of all, if you haven't heard of it and you are attending this event, but I will key you in either way. Direct File is a new IRS initiative that lets people file their taxes for free online directly with the government. Arguably, tax returns are pretty a universal government form. So, of course, it had to be at FormFest. And we're going to go behind the scenes with our panelists today to hear how they're simplifying tax filing and building public trust. Thank you all for being here, panelists. I'd love if you could each sort of briefly introduce yourself and tell us all about your role on Direct File and why you're excited about this work. Allison, you're first on my screen, so how about you go first?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Natalie, and so great to be with everyone. My name's Allison Abbott. I'm a design researcher and strategist with Direct File, a recent alum of the U.S. Digital Service, and currently working with the IRS to continue the Direct File work. And this work with Direct File is so important to me. Before this, I was working in the benefits space and seeing how hard it is for folks to be able to access resources and funds they may be entitled to. When we think about taxes and the amount of credits that are available to families, if we can make it easier, cheaper, faster for people to file their taxes, that has a direct impact on their ability to access really important credits. So I'm really excited about that lens of the direct file work.
Alisa, you're next on my screen.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. My name is Alisa Liu, and I'm the Director of Engineering for IRS Direct File. Been on the project for a year and a half. And in the pilot year, I led the Secure State Integration, which is a feature that we use to enable taxpayers with a state tax obligation to export their federal return from Direct File to a state website. What I'm most excited about is the impact of our project. One stat we talk about a lot at the IRS is that 63% of the public's burden of dealing with the government is because of taxes. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to transform these basic interactions between government and people through Direct File.
Great. And Suzanne, what about you?
Yeah, hi, Suzanne Chapman. I'm the Director of User Experience. And I have been working on this since it was a very tiny team of, I think we had 8 people. So have seen it kind of grow and blossom. But I'm just excited to talk about the amazing team that put this together and all the cool stuff we've done.
Yeah, well, let's get started with that. I like that. Alisa, I know you have a slide to show, I believe. And how about we start with how you and your team approach the challenge of turning paper and PDF tax forms into a user-friendly digital experience? How did you approach that task?
Yeah, sure. So I see the slide is already up. I'll get to that in a little bit. So I wanted to just start by saying we started with a taxpayer first approach, understanding what is going to be best for the user through research and design, which Suzanne and Allison will speak more about. As we all are aware, taxes are hard. So we went to the taxpayer first to learn from them what their challenges are, to try to make tax filing as easy as possible. We knew from the start that we didn't want Direct File to just be a digital version of the 1040 and would want to do something more sophisticated. The IRS has over 800 PDFs and forms for taxpayers, and we didn't want to just take those box by box and turn that into a form on a website. What we wanted to do was reimagine the experience of filing your taxes by starting with the bare minimum facts and the information that you know about yourself. Our goal is to find the shortest path for each taxpayer, only asking the questions that are relevant to your situation so that the typical taxpayer would only need to answer a few dozen questions. For example, there's a section of Direct File that asks questions about your family and your household. Lots of questions to establish whether somebody could be your dependent or qualifying person in order to check eligibility for a number of tax credits. But we don't ask a question if we already know the person will not qualify you for any additional benefits. There's very complex edge cases here, including one that would apply only to children of divorced or separated parents who's over the age of 18, but living in one of 3 states where the age of majority is 19 or 21. We're not going to ask everyone that question. So based on the information you already provided, we'll ask the basic questions first and progressively more complex questions only if needed. So yeah, on the technical side, starting with just these facts, our engineering team built a tax calculation engine, what we call the fact graph, and here is a visual of it here. We have a poster-sized printout of this in our DC office, and it's even bigger and more complex in person. There's over 2,500 facts in our system today, and as we add new tax forms, we'll need to collect more information and create more facts, so this thing is still growing. The nodes in the graph represent the information that we collect from the basics, like your name, your address, the things like your federal withholding on your W-2, whether you had student loan interest payments, etc. And then there are a bunch of edges between the nodes that represent the relationships between the facts. And you can see that a lot of them are connected and dependent on each other. Yeah, taxes are hard and complex. So as the design team created the simplest set of questions and screens for a user, the engineers were finding the shortest path in the graph for a specific user's tax return. Another way to think about the fact graph is as a fancy spreadsheet. The taxpayer enters information and the spreadsheet performs the logical operations, the math to result in a completed return. DirectFile doesn't ask you every single question to fill out the spreadsheet fully. It progressively works out based on the facts that you already provided, how much more it needs to know, and then only asks what it needs to know. Our fact graph actually does more than store all that information. We also use it to define the user interface and the screens a user goes through on the website. All of the screens follow a pretty standard format with typically one question per screen so that the user can focus on one piece of information at a time. And for the sake of enabling our engineers to move quickly, the fact graph is also used as the building blocks of the screens. So an engineer can build the screen at the same time as building in the tax logic. The logic itself is run on both the backend servers and in the user's browser, storing the information we need for their tax return. And this enables us to move pretty quickly, iterating, adding tax scope for our pilot, and moving forward as we expand who will be eligible for direct file. We're also improving the framework so it's faster for our team to work on it and so that we can respond to anything that happens, like if the tax code changes. And yeah, in summary, like our engineers and designers really do just work hand in hand, making sure that our technical solution is appropriate for the real problem that we're learning from taxpayers directly.
If that is the online version of this fact graph, I don't know if I want to see the in-person one, which you said is even bigger. Yeah, I think that gets to our next question. Obviously, that's really confusing looking to me, someone who doesn't do this work and just gets the pleasure of moderating stuff and writing about this stuff. But I know from experience, as most Americans do, that tax forms can also be incredibly complicated and stressful for users when you're trying to fill them out on the front end. I know this was something you guys were thinking about with direct file, so I'm curious how you guys have sort of tried to balance the need for accuracy, ease of use, and trustworthiness in this digital tax form.
Yeah, I'll take that. It is outrageously complex, and taxes are an extremely stressful situation. So we try to be very thoughtful about that. I'll share one sort of framing that at least helps me personally when we're sort of wrestling with this, like all this really complex information that we have to navigate. And so imagine a Venn diagram with 3 circles. And one circle is that accuracy piece, right? With tax, something like taxes, but pretty much everything everyone here works on has some need for a level of accuracy. And so accuracy is key. And we have amazing subject matter experts and tax lawyers who help make sure that what we've put together is, in fact, tax accurate. But they are working hand in hand with the designers, content strategists, and researchers who are also engaging with that text. Like, they're reading tax code, like they're doing a lot of hard work to try to figure out how to make that easy, which takes me to the second circle, which is easy. It's got to be easy. It doesn't matter how accurate it is. If people don't understand the words that you're putting in front of them, they're going to answer it wrong, right? This is something I've told many a lawyer, that plain language increases compliance. If you want people to have the right answer and an accurate answer, you have to put it in words that they can understand. And so the third circle is short, because it doesn't matter if it's perfectly accurate or perfectly worded. If it's a dissertation in length, people aren't going to take the time to read it. So our day-to-day, hour-to-hour struggle is trying to figure out how to get to that center of the Venn diagram and really kind of nail all three of those. And kind of thinking about it that way, I think helps me sort of see where we're not sort of nailing it. And then we can kind of talk through what are some creative solutions for that. Like, oh, this has gotten too long. How do we break this up? But also in the cases where we actually do need to sacrifice something, we can have an honest conversation about what does it mean to go too far in this corner of the Venn diagram? What's the trade-off to that decision? So it kind of helped us think through that. You talk about the trust thing, though. That's, I think, kind of a layer on top of all of that. It's sort of embedded in everything that we do. So I'll start by sharing a stat that we're very proud of, which is that last year, for our inaugural year, we surveyed people who used direct file, and 86% of them said that using direct file increased their trust of the IRS, which is massive, because we don't know where their starting point was, but a lot of people are going to be zero or negatives when it comes to trusting the government. That's just kind of universal. So getting that 86% gain in trust was something that we didn't just luck into that. We put a great deal of work into that. And starting from day one, before we had done really any real design, we were off talking to taxpayers to kind of hear their firsthand stories, what does cause anxiety for them, and kind of ask the basic question: what do you think if the IRS let you file directly for free? What do you think about that? And I'm pretty sure every single person we talked to said yes. They loved the free. That's easy. A lot of people cited that they understood that the IRS would be an authoritative source, so they were trusting the accuracy right out of the gate without seeing anything. But where the but came in, yes, but, is that, but they don't trust government to make something that's easy. They've had bad experiences across all corners of the government, unfortunately. So they don't trust the government to do it easy. And if it's not easy, they don't have confidence in their own ability to do it right, to kind of parse difficult language and things like that. So we kind of took those insights, took them to heart, and used that to kind of develop a grand vision for what we wanted the user experience of direct file to be. And at the center of that is, how are we going to design to earn trust and build confidence? And so we have a lot of things. I would need a whole hour to talk about them. But two of our kind of core principles are around transparency and giving people the option to raise their tax literacy. We assume people don't know anything about the taxes, but some people maybe want to learn a little bit more about taxes, so that they can feel confident and feel empowered that they are making the best choices for themselves. So a couple examples around that. One is just showing the math. We could have hidden all that lovely complexity in the fact graph and just ask questions and then plop at the end, here's your number of what you owe or what you're getting back. But we felt it was important to kind of give people the option to kind of see how we came up with that final amount. Or when we ask questions around citizenship, which can make some people feel kind of uncomfortable, we give a little link that says, why are we asking this? So that people can kind of understand, whether something's a requirement or how their answer may impact their actual tax outcome. So lots of little things like that we build in, a million tiny decisions, no grand gestures for earning that trust.
Yeah. one thing I'm picking up on, it sounds like taxpayer feedback was part of this during the pilot. Allison, I'm curious how that feedback influenced design choices and improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that to what Suzanne said earlier, user research was part of our work from day one before we even did launch. So we had a high level of confidence going into what this brand new product would be, that was informed by taxpayers and users on day one. But we also had enough wherewithal to know that there was going to be a lot more that we were going to learn once we were actually launched, and especially as we scaled. And it was really important for us to not just have learnings from our pilot be something that we collected and looked at as part of our after action report, but rather we wanted it to be a part of our day one experience. The first day we were live, we were setting up our feedback loop strategy, which was we had daily huddles starting on day one. Where we had folks from user research, we had folks from our data analytics team. Really critically, we had some of our customer support representatives all joining for, at the beginning of the pilot, a daily feedback session where we were able to share both quantitative and qualitative insights that we were picking up. We didn't need things necessarily to be statistically significant to raise them in these daily huddles. We didn't need to have a beautiful long slide deck of all of these rich, robust insights. All of that is important, and also we needed to be able to, on the daily, be trading insights of early trends, early signals we were picking up. For example, in customer support, if we were just starting to get an inkling that we were getting, an uptick in questions about XYZ, that was enough for us to pass to our UX team to go back and say, if someone was tripped up on the W2 box 14 question, for example, our UX team was able to pick up those early insights from our daily insight huddles, revisit the way that we worded or phrased some of these questions, conduct a little more user research if need be, and then make some tweaks from there. So everything from small wording tweaks that we considered no regrets work, early insights that we could be making with great regularity, and then also some bigger things that we discovered along the way. For example, as we triangulated our insights between data analytics, user research, and our customer support findings, one example in particular is we were finding there was a number of taxpayers whose return was being rejected because when it came time to enter their adjusted gross income, their AGI, for one reason or another, they were entering the wrong number. Sometimes it's easy to confuse your AGI with any other number of numbers you have on your tax return. It might be that folks were looking at the wrong year for their previous year automatic or adjusted gross income. In any event, we saw, okay, this is a place where taxpayers are getting tripped up. What might we be able to do to make this an easier experience for taxpayers? Our X team ran a mid-pilot sprint to take those insights, look at what some of our options were. And what we ended up discovering was, these taxpayers have already authenticated themselves by this point in the flow. We could probably just connect an API here where we could allow taxpayers to automatically import their AGI data, which would then ensure that typos went down, that they weren't pulling the wrong number. And when we implemented that, we saw a drastic drop in the number of rejected returns. So not only were we able to do these small tweaks, little, day-to-day, no regrets work, we were able to launch an entire new feature. And notably, the dates that we were able to do this is kind of wild in hindsight. We conceived of this idea, I think, on March 25th or something like that. And then we shipped it on April 5th. So the fact that we were able to do these in pilot feature launches really speaks to the way our systems were set up to be able to be agile and to be iterative as we went through. The one other point I'll make is just that for a first year pilot, there's so much that you don't know of what you can make your best guesses. But for example, when we were preparing our customer support reps for how to help taxpayers use direct file. We had never had taxpayers out in the wild using direct file before we launched, and we had to make our best guesses as to how to help customer support reps help those folks. And so having a system in place where we could have those feedback loops was absolutely critical, that we could be using real data and very quickly iterating on what were our early best guesses. But it was a central piece of the direct file puzzle here.
Suzanne, I saw you nodding a little bit earlier. I'm curious if you have anything to add on taxpayer feedback and how that funneled into user experience for direct file.
Yeah, it really is the heart and soul of what we do. I'll talk about this maybe in a minute too, but it was one of the things on our short list of like, what do we need to do to accomplish this grand task? And being able to do a large quantity of research was a really big part of that. And it was sort of a non-negotiable. If we weren't able to do the amount that we felt we needed to do, we just weren't going to launch, like full stop. Because when you have a short timeline and a really large task, things like that can get cut. But we were all like fiercely dedicated to the idea that we were going to need to do a lot of research, and it really is a big part of what we do.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a question from the chat. Someone is curious how big your team was for direct file.
Yeah, 8 people. No, I'm just kidding. It's no longer 8 people. I actually don't know what the current count is. I can say that it's in the many tens. We do have, I think, 6 organizations that are involved. So obviously we have a bunch of IRS people, USDS, 18F. We have 2 contractor groups, and then a couple of US Digital Corps fellows. And we've built this team to be very like embedded. The vendors work alongside the government people. Every single person on the team is empowered to lead, to have opinions, to flag when something's going wrong. Please tell us that something's going wrong, so before it's too late and we can all fix it. So it's a very collaborative team. The other thing I'm very proud of, and not every project needs this, but direct file absolutely did, is the ratio of engineering to UX people is about 1 to 1. So for every engineer, there's somebody who specializes in research, content, or design, or all 3. We have a lot of good generalists too. And I know that that's fairly rare on government projects, but that was a really important piece because of that, earning trust and building people's confidence. And that takes people, if you want a good user experience, you have to have people who specialize in how to do a good user experience. Yeah, but it's a large team. It's a large team.
Yeah. I'm curious if you guys have any lessons from direct file that you think could apply to other government forms. Whoever wants to go first, feel free.
I'll go ahead and start with that. I think at least something that worked well for us is that we took time at the beginning, as we've sort of already talked about, to kind of set our vision. And doing that based on the insights of talking to our actual users, but also bringing to the table our collective past experience of projects that we've worked on that worked or failed, because both are really important. Because I think we all saw this as a sort of a once in a career opportunity. So we had a real YOLO attitude of like, we really have to get this right. They're actually letting us try this. So we kind of have to put everything we can into it. And so part of that was doing that kind of work up front and putting together various materials and some guidance basically for ourselves. So all those various principles, but also setting those standards, right? That we are dedicated to human-centered design. We're major mobile first. In fact, I think we're pretty much mobile only. There's 1 page out of the 800 screens that we have designed in a desktop layout. So we're just really dedicated to those types of methods. Spanish is a really big part of it for last year. That again could have been something that we cut, but we decided that's not negotiable. We're going to launch a Spanish version. That's part of what we need to kind of test drive, whether or not this is a feasible thing to build and maintain. And accessibility. We're all required to do 508. compliance, but it was important to us that we go beyond that, because something can be compliant and still a terrible experience. So we put extra effort into that. So we put all that together, like we put it in writing, right? And we were the ones who, like, nobody else is going to tell us. Let's put it in writing. That's always number one. If you don't have this, be the one to like think about it. That helps align the team to make sure every single new person that comes onto the team, we know they share those values. So we're not having to kind of argue with our teammates about what's important. We are all in agreement from the beginning. Every time we have a new stakeholder, we can kind of share bits and pieces with them to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we're not having to kind of relitigate things all the time. So just getting that kind of the vision in writing, I think was massively helpful and highly recommended for pretty much any project. Allison, you want me to pop it to you?
Yeah, happy to share my thoughts for advice. Ultimately, for me, it comes down to being able to test, iterate, and then retest throughout the design and development process. And one thing that I think, in hindsight, it's easy to forget because it went by so fast, but we were live, I think, for a grand total of 11 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. When we were actually live with Direct File, it was a matter of a number of weeks. And the fact that we were still able to set up our systems such that we could be ready to hit the ground on finding opportunities for improvement and iterating, testing it, and then launching it. I think one of the things that made that most possible was that we had our systems set up well before the start of filing season. So for example, even something, it sounds as silly or as easy as just, we carved out time on the calendar to make sure that starting on day one, we would have all the right people in the right room to be able to review the data and make some decisions. Trying to get all those people's calendars aligned, if we had started that on day one, it might have been a few weeks before we really hit the ground running, where having that plan set up and agreed upon well in advance, and we had a set of shared principles as a team well in advance, allowed us to hit the ground running day one, which did allow us to make iterations and during a very, very short period of time. And then just echoing something that Suzanne said, also the importance of, as part of this testing and as part of this research, talking to folks with a wide variety of experiences. So we were able to talk with folks who use screen readers or voice to text. I think our stats are before launch and during launch of the pilot. Overall, we did 33 studies in just about 200 individual taxpayers we were able to speak to. And every single one of those led to improvements and changes to our product. So cannot emphasize enough how important that is, both before and during a pilot's launch. Alisa, can I?
I'm curious, what lessons learned do you have? I'm still trying to process the graph you shared. So I'm happy to take any takeaways you have.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna double down a little bit on testing for a bit. That was something that I feel like we learned the hard way, that we needed to test from day one of like starting the project all the way through the end and then during production as well. So we prioritize enabling an internal direct file demo environment from the beginning so that our team had access to the latest code 24/7. Non-engineers could take a look at what was currently in progress. Our product managers, designers, customer support could test out the latest changes, catch issues early, and start that conversation early about fixing things. And once we had that working end-to-end prototype, we set up multiple rounds of testing with our tax subject matter experts, with our state partners, doing performance testing, making sure that the systems would be stable when we open to the public and all of that. And for the tax accuracy piece, how we tested that was we used data and statistics to come up with some like tax return kind of profiles. So our team developed a number of those, used those to test the accuracy and UX, trying to create like a realistic set of taxpayers and set up automated testing so that would run on a regular basis. We weren't seeing regressions with new changes that we were pushing forth. We partnered with a lot of groups across the IRS as well as our state tax partners to identify the trickiest areas, the most complex tax scenarios, and gave those some extra QA love. Yeah, and like Allison said, we just like continuously learned from our own data, what was happening in production, from the metrics that we were tracking, and from our customer service representatives, the qualitative data that they were collecting, what they were hearing directly from taxpayers. Another kind of aspect to this was, like Allison mentioned, our pilot was pretty short, probably about 3 months, but we also did a phased rollout approach to launching direct file. So we didn't do a big bang launch on day one. We actually slowly opened it up to more and more taxpayers. So kind of in that first phase with probably a handful of people, we were able to catch some issues, fix them, kind of test out deploying our systems, fixing those issues before we were able to expand more widely so that more and more folks could access direct file. So getting lots of insights through that phase rollout and also made it safer so that we could kind of control how many issues were going out and fix as many things as we can. So yeah, I feel like what the things we learned were you can never do too much testing, and to use data continuously to iteratively improve the experience.
That makes a lot of sense. We have one question from the chat I wanted to ask you guys. Someone asked if you have any advice on making iterative changes during a pilot when that pilot is run over a shorter time frame, like a few months is the example they offered. Allison, I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I would say that some of the things that really helped us be able to make those iterations over the 3 months that we had our live pilot was one, again, having systems set up well in advance of day one so that the team is prepared and kind of knows what is going to be asked of them starting on day one, including leadership, including folks from different organizations. So, for example, that we could have that daily huddle off to the races. We knew that one of the outputs of that was going to be what are actions we can take away and how might we reprioritize our backlog. Having all of that agreed upon in advance allowed us to hit the ground running rather than getting a few weeks to get our ducks in a row. And another piece I think I would say is also that our staff, we were going into the pilot with the intention of, we know there are going to be things that we're going to discover, especially with the phased rollout that Alisa talked about. We know when we have just dozens of taxpayers, they're going to help us find things that we need to fix before we launch to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of taxpayers. And so having staff at the ready to take that on and knowing that was going to be part of our roadmap allowed us to be ready to grab these opportunities with both arms, and as opposed to trying to layer iterations on top of folks who were totally already swamped with just trying to keep the ship afloat. So having those structures in place really helped us move quickly.
Alisa, do you have anything to add on that iterating in a short time frame?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that what direct file did for those 3 months was not typical of like an IRS digital product. So we did have a lot of work to do to kind of set the expectation that we were going to deploy at least twice a week to production. We were constantly changing application. We weren't just going to launch something in January and keep that the same the whole filing season. So that was really important to work out with leadership and making sure that just the pace of change that we were aiming for was something that everyone was on board with and practicing kind of the structures and systems that Allison was talking about, so that we could do things quickly when we had to.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I feel like after this conversation, one question everyone will want to know is what's next for direct file. I can share well, let's let Suzanne do it. Are there any updates you can share? And also be sure, I guess, to give us the basics for those that maybe aren't keyed into every announcement, etc.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So last year, being the pilot, we had a fairly limited scope because the whole point was just to try out whether or not we could pull this off. And then when we were approved to continue on, we immediately set out to figure out, well, how do we expand? Because we launched in the middle of tax season last year. This year we plan to launch on day one of tax season, whenever that is. We don't know the date yet, but we will launch on day one of tax season when it opens in January. More income types, more credits, more everything, just trying to kind of expand it in really savvy ways to try to just make it so that more people are eligible. So for those who are interested and this is an option for them, then just to see more people be able to come through that door. And so you can imagine with January right around the corner, we are super heads down trying to do the kind of last fine tuning of preparing for that. But yeah, we're really excited to launch and to see it through. We're have big plans for April 15th to celebrate. But please, if anyone thinks you know somebody who might be eligible. Oh, and states. Sorry, I forgot about the states. We have doubled our states that we are partnering with because most states, not all of them, require state taxes. So we want to make sure people continue and do their state tax obligations as well. So yes, please spread the word about direct file if you know anyone who might be interested.
Alisa, does that expansion of tax scope change the graph you shared earlier?
Yeah, definitely. The team is still actively building and adding many more facts as we speak.
Well, I'm sure it sounds like you guys are very busy. So I think I speak on behalf of everyone to thank you for being here today. One last question from the chat. Someone wants to know if anything in direct file is open source.
So not yet, but that is on our roadmap to push next year. So hopefully soon, but not yet.
All right. Well, people will have to watch for that. And for now, as much as I think we could talk about this all day, that is just about all of the time we have. So I'm sure that all of you that are doing this work in your own way, in your own organizations, have a lot to think about after this panel. I know I learned a lot. And yeah, think about how to apply these types of innovations into your own work. With that, though, I'm going to hand it back over to our MCs for the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much for coming to FormFest 2024. Kirsten, I remember last year when FormFest was coming to a close, I felt like we wanted to throw confetti in the air, and I have that feeling all over again this year. I'm just filled with so much joy, and I hope you all enjoyed nerding out on all things government forms as much as we did.
Yes, we really appreciate seeing how much enthusiasm was out there, watching comments in the chat, emoji reactions. It was just really great to see. We know that this time of the year is so busy, and so the fact that everyone took time to be here really speaks to the value of this event. Like you, we love forms and we love data from forms, so we would love it if you would please fill out our feedback form from today. It really helps us figure out how to make FormFest even better as we look ahead to 2025.
Yeah, and can we just take a minute to talk about how impressive today's sessions were?
Yeah, I mean, I related so much to Allison Hyam in the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction session. She started off by introducing herself and she said, "I am first and foremost a forms person."
Very relatable.
Yes, and I think all of us, I mean, that's why FormFest is so much fun, is that all of us who love to think about forms all day have a place to go and people to meet. So just really was impressed with that. And then I think our closing speaker, Suzanne Chapman said, plain language increases compliance. 4 words, I think we're all going to take that back and think about the ways that we can apply some really simple language to our work and make a big impact.
Yeah, and I, like Natalie, I'm still mentally processing the fact graph and just thinking about it getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we're sitting here. And so, yeah, just such a great event all around. And honestly, just a huge thank you to everyone who contributed to FormFest today. We're deeply grateful to each and every one of you. And truly, you all have reminded us why this work matters so much and how even small incremental changes can have a big impact. Also, we'd be remiss if we did not give a shout out to our behind the scenes team. And though they are not on camera, we want to make sure we thank all the good people at Beck Center and Code for America who worked hand in hand very hard for months on end to pull this together. I wish I could march them all out here to have them take a bow, but they would never agree to it. But truly, we couldn't have done it without them. So thank you to all of them as well. They're the real MVPs.
And thanks to all of their great work. All of today's sessions were recorded, so you can catch anything that you missed or rewatch your favorites, maybe show them to your family over the holidays on the Beck Center's Digital Service Network YouTube and Code for America's YouTube channels. And we'll also be sharing highlights and speaker profiles on social media. You can also check out the hashtag FormFest 2024 for some quotes, screen grabs, things like that.
Yeah, and if today's session sparks something for you, we would love to see you at Code for America Summit in DC this May. It's going to be another great opportunity to learn and connect. We're just starting to vet through all the good ideas that came in through our call for proposals, but already it's shaping up to be a really good one. So please do keep an eye on our website for more information. We'd love to see you there. And until then, let's all keep this fierce fandom going.
All right, and so Marlena wrote this last piece for me. There are a lot of F words, so here we go.
Not bad ones.
So with that, farewell, fellow form fanatics. Go forth in the name of flawless forms, and may all of your fields be frustration-free.
Nailed it. Bye, everyone. Thank you.